Good afternoon. I hope you're okay. I hope you're well this Friday or whenever you're watching this. It's incredibly windy here. I don't know what it's like where you are, but it's like gale force winds, and I'm about to go camping for the first time since I was a child. So this will be fun. I've got a tent, and it's gale force winds. So what could go wrong? So this week I had a question, or more of a worry, from one of the women in the group who was saying, I smoke. I smoke, and I really don't want to be smoking, but I'm frightened of giving up smoking because I don't want to put on weight. And I asked her if it was all right to do a chat about it, and she agreed. So here I am. I thought this was a really interesting one, and one I haven't heard from any member of the group before, but for me, I remember being a heavy smoker and being really frightened in my mind that if I gave up, I would put on weight. I don't know where I got that from. I don't know where I created that myth from, but it's not an uncommon myth. So my guess is at some point I read it somewhere and then made that mean something about me. And of course, when we feel like weight is a thing for us anyway, and we've got anxiety around what we think we look like, then of course it becomes a way to keep us kind of in a habit. And I guess there are two habits there. So one habit of smoking, one habit of being incredibly mean to yourself, and another habit of perhaps believing that you can put on weight, or having an experience of putting on weight, or perhaps potentially eating foods and stuff like that, comfort eating, snack eating, all of those things that we can label but all really point to the same thing. So I just wanted to speak a little bit to that, because one of the ways that we look at that in my freedom program is to say we all have a way that we try and find peace. So in this lady's example, she's smoking, and the thing with smoking, which is really interesting, is that we breathe in and we breathe out, and so it essentially does have that kind of, in our mind, although that's pretty unconscious, a bit of a calming effect on our system. The irony of that is that it creates more anxiety for us, because we're always thinking about the next cigarette, we're always if we're running out, we're forward thinking, when am I going to get the next packet? There's always forward planning. And I think the same goes for if you have an issue with food. I mean, I had both personally. I had smoking, I had eating, I had drinking, I had not eating, I had over-exercising. Those of you that have been with me a long time know I've had pretty much every single habit you can imagine. And that's why it's not the thing. There's always something underneath that. So what I want the lady who was talking to me about this to know is that there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. It may take the form of cigarettes, and anxious thinking about giving up, and anxious thinking about how you look, but essentially it's the same thing, okay? So when we create the belief that if we give up, we're going to gain weight, then the incentive to give up smoking isn't coming from a healthy place. It's coming from a place of, I want to be thin, I want to stay thin, and if I'm thin, I'm okay. So there's the kind of way we will justify it to ourselves. Now, what's underneath that is a feeling of not being good enough, ultimately. Not being okay with how you are, how you show up in the world, how you look. And I'd really recommend those of you that haven't watched the Comfortable in Your Own Skin videos, which if you're in my Facebook group, are in the Facebook group, comfortable in your own skin, you'll find them in the units. And also, so I'd encourage you to watch those 5 videos as a starting point to kind of seeing how we are way more than this body, and how when we go into stressful thinking, because in caveman times we'd be running away from something or freezing or fighting, our survival instinct kicks in, which means we start to think about our physical body, our physical being. And as time has gone on and we've moved forwards in current society, what happens is we turn that inwards. When we're under stress and we say, well, I'm ugly, or I'm fat, or there's something wrong with me physically, that's coming from a survival point of view, and it's very natural, but there's nothing wrong with you. And that's the biggest message I want you to hear. Now, when we think that there's something wrong with us, say like, oh, well, I smoke, I call it the tip of the iceberg, so I smoke and I put on weight easily and I'm frightened of this, that and the other, we kind of see that that's our problem. And what we then do when we have a quote-unquote problem is we add on something. So we might add on nicotine patches, and then we might add on MyFitnessPal to count calories and count our steps, and it becomes something that we put a lot of attention on over here, right? So we have like a behavioural model to change. We think there's something wrong and we add on. The way that I work with people is to show them that behavioural models, can work pretty well. But it gives us quite a lot more things to do. There's a lot to do there. So I put on a patch, I might join a group, I might have an app, all of those things. Same with alcohol. We kind of always adding on. And what I want people to hear is that this is a subtractive model. When we see this understanding that I teach for what it is, it takes stuff off of your mind. It takes stuff off of your mind. So there's less things for you to do. So if you did want to give up smoking, I'd want you to consider that all you're ever doing when you are doing the habit is trying to find peace of mind. And peace of mind is something that's inherently yours. You were born with it, and you have an awful lot of thinking which tells you that you believe that there's something wrong with you. And habits are formed from our lower brain. They're formed from our reptilian brain, and the more we repeat the habit, the more dopamine is released. The more dopamine is released, which is the reinforcing hormone. It's the hormone that's released when we have sex because we need to keep procreating. The more we do the habit, the more your lower brain thinks you need to do the habit to survive. So we're talking about a kind of survival-based, primitive part of your brain that's habit-forming, pattern-forming, and likes routine, that doesn't have any conscious awareness. And then we have lots of thinking about what that means, and we think that voice that's telling us to have the cigarette, to have the food, to have the wine, to create lots of anxious thinking, because essentially that's a habit of thought. We think that's coming from us. In actual fact, it's coming from a healthy, working lower brain, okay? Which sort of is quite difficult, I think, for people to hear, that there's nothing wrong with you, and you have this primitive brain which is telling you to do a habit that you don't particularly want to do. So there's this push-pull, don't do your habit, do your habit, don't do your habit, do your habit. So what I teach in my freedom program, or if you work with me in a different way, it's about understanding. It's about love and understanding. Understanding that there's nothing wrong with you, understanding how your brain works from a neurological level, and loving yourself anyway, being gentle with yourself. This is about seeing something about yourself which is true, about how all human beings work, and your little brain will try and tell you otherwise. And we all work the same way. That's why, although I haven't heard this one, well, in all the time I've been running the groups, I want to give up smoking, but I'm frightened of putting on weight. I knew as soon as I heard it, I thought, yes, there'll be so many women that this resonates with, because it was a thing for me, which means me and this lady aren't the only two people in the world that will have that thought, okay? The more I do this work, the more I realise, wow, we all have the same thoughts, and we keep them to ourselves. We're ashamed of them, we're embarrassed by them, and we feel alone. So I hope you know you're not alone. I hope you know there's nothing wrong with you. If you want to talk to me more about this, then great. I'd love to talk to you. If you want to talk to me about the Freedom Programme, I'd love to talk to you about that. We talk about that and so much more, and just seeing that the habit that you think you have is just the tip of the iceberg, and you are so much more than that, so much more than that. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with that for now, because I'm going camping. Huzzah! I'll talk to you very soon. Lots of love. Take care.